The United States is the greatest terrorist state in the world. That's just
I would probably agree with that.
That's just based on numbers. Like we've occupied, that we are the empire state here. We've been living in the past 50 to 80 years. We've been living in a unipolar moment. Okay, that's just in world history. That's just where we find ourselves. We've awakened in this time. We have political consciousness in this moment where there has been a world superpower for the past ever since the post-World War II, ever since the end of World War II, we have demonstrated unparalleled world supremacy.
Certainly since the Cold War.
Yeah, that's what I mean, post-World War II, right. Cold War. Absolutely. So when you say terrorists, what you're talking about is resistance to terrorism. You're talking about resistance to occupation. We are occupying all of these lands. If we just got the fuck out of the Middle East, just take a look at a map. Look at a map, pull up the map of the military bases that are in the Middle East right now. They're ringing and dotting the entire region, okay? You can't find an analog in the Western Hemisphere of Middle Easterners or any other, culture or country that is posturing the same way in the American sphere of influence. Okay.
Well, maybe like Minneapolis has a lot of Somalis, but it is different. Yeah, I know. It is a little different than what you're saying. Obviously, America is a much bigger occupier, so I agree with that. Like, we are the bullies that kind of start all this drama. But to your point, though, the Islamophobia, this thing. Not all Muslims are bad, right? I mean,
of course not.
I mean, so when you label like every Muslim as a terrorist, I mean, I
didn't label every Muslim.
I know, and I'm not even trying to get on you. I just feel like that narrative, we've created that narrative, and that is kind of a propaganda war that every Muslim guy is trying to blow us up, which is obviously not true.
I think every Islamist is trying to, and the funny thing is, by the way, the answer to the question I asked you is it's over 60,000, over 60,000 terrorist attacks, according to the International Council for Terrorism,
you're
an appeal to authority.
Let's appeal to
authority on the UN. So I might as well bring up those stats.
Yeah. So what is it? The International Council for Terrorism? What is that?
I can't remember the name of it. I think it's the International Terrorism Council.
How convenient.
Or something like that. But it's the main site that documents terrorist events.
Yeah, funded by the State Department.
So what's the UN funded by? Exactly. Shut up.
The UN.
So now, hold on.
I'm sorry. The UN is funded by the United States.
There's over 60,000 documented.
And the UN is actually the institution that I'm citing, which is funded by the UN, and even they confer.
Hold on.
Let's take turns.
You think every single one of these instances, over 60,000 over the past 50 years that have been documented, whether you agree with the numbers or not, you think all of those are resistance, but what Israel is doing right now, after we watched on Telegram what happened on October 7th, is not resistance. Do you see the problem in your logic?
I see the problem in your logic in not understanding that Israel, according to the world consensus, is the belligerent occupier ever since 1967 formally. So 20 years, 2 decades before the creation of Hamas, there was the acquisition of territory that Israel occupied, subsequently settled.
Global terrorism database, by the way.
And that's 2 decades before the creation of Hamas. Okay. So you have to ask yourself, and I know this is hard for you to have self-reflection, but in the 20 years since the War of Acquisition in 1967, 1987, what was going on? What was Israel doing that would have led to Palestinians feeling as though we need to engage in armed resistance against this occupying army, against this occupying force? It's concluded by every relevant authority in this matter, okay, that Israel has imposed an illegal blockade and siege of the Gaza Strip. They have, starved the and.
You keep saying starved, right? Why would Israel have to feed them?
Because they're an occupying army, and the laws of belligerent occupation require that if you
but they're not occupying.
No, listen.
Yeah, but there is an asymmetrical power struggle where Israel has power, so they are responsible.
Yes,
I can hope so.
The law of belligerent occupation, administered by the International Committee for the Red Cross, tells us what this
Is that
means.
State Department
the
funded?
right? No, it's not. It's an international institution. And again, you can laugh, but this is we're talking about universal humanitarian laws. And if you are a belligerent occupier under universal humanitarian laws, you have the rights of occupation, okay? You have rights as a belligerent occupier, but you also incur responsibilities, and Israel defaults on those responsibilities.
I just want to point out that the U.S. tried to establish a pier in Gaza to deliver aid, and they were constantly attacked and had to be dismantled under Biden. So Hamas or whatever groups in Palestine were not looking for help because the U.S. tried to deliver it. So there is resistance going on that you have to acknowledge in the Gaza Strip to this day.
I mean, and you see.
I think that pier was a political stunt.
You see the pallets of food and fuel and coal.
Yeah, they're not being let in by Israel.
They're not being let in by Israel. Then why does Israel have the pallets sitting there ready to go in?
Because international
have you seen the video?
aid organizations have delivered it up to the apartheid wall, and they are met by IDF forces who say no.
Would you agree that you have working eyes and ears based off of this conversation? I think that's in the affirmative. Have you seen the videos of Hamas firing on their own civilians, right, when they get those aid trucks in? You haven't seen them?
That's Israeli. That's Israeli. That's those Israeli forces that have done that.
No,
and again, even if that was true, even if it was true,
it's fucking true.
We're talking about a belligerent occupier occupying people.
Then why are they shooting their own citizens?
They don't get the right to say. They don't get the right to say, "Oh, look at them."
So is Hamas?
Look at what they're doing.
So is
they're
Hamas
engaging.
against the Palestinians?
They're stealing the loot. They're looting the aid. Dude, get out of their fucking country.
No, it's Gaza.
Stop blocking the aid.
I'm talking
You
about
have no
Gazans.
right. You have no right to go in there and tell them
Israelis.
how much food can be let in. They're a country. They're allowed to trade.
They're not a country.
They're allowed.
You said it earlier.
They're not a country because they're denied the rights of a country.
But you're saying they're not a
and
country.
I think that's wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can make that argument, but
I
they're not a
can, and I
country.
just did.
So you can't occupy something that isn't a fucking country.
Yes, you can. It is a country
It's
under
Israel.
international law. It's recognized as a sovereign territory, but it is under illegal
it's a territory.
occupation.
It's a territory
country
in
that is being
Israel.
deprived its rights as a country.
Yeah, but real
And
quick, Misfit,
it's not a country.
You love America. You're a Misfit patriot. You would die for this country, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
So why wouldn't a Palestinian do the same thing? Whether you're in Texas or Massachusetts, I'm saying they're going to die for the country just like you would die for America.
That's a valid point. It's actually a really good point. And we had a civil war over the issue of slavery, right? And some people thought they were right, and the other people thought they were right, and they fucking killed each other. And I think that it was necessary to end slavery. I wouldn't say that the North and the South both didn't believe what they were doing is correct. But I think that we can all agree that one side was right, one side was wrong, and the good guys won. And this is no different. This is no different. This is, you have the Palestinians, not the Palestinian people, the Hamas supporting Palestinians, and you have the de facto government that they elected. And this is why they don't have a right to any of these arguments of, we're a territory, you're occupying. Because the Palestinians got together like 20 years ago, and they said, you know who we want to be our government? Hamas. Okay.
And do you know why they said that? Do you know why they said that? Because they were under illegal occupation. It's an occupied territory.
Okay, so they voted in terrorists to fight the illegal
no, it's not
occupation.
terrorists. It's not terrorists. It's because the Israelis installed subcontractors to carry out the duties of occupation in the name of the PLO. And the Palestinians correctly realized that their situation was not changing. The Oslo Accords in the 90s did not come to a peaceful appropriation of their rights. And so what do? You become disillusioned. You're smug, and you're not under occupation. You don't know what it's like being systematically starved. You don't know what it's like to have your families bombed in the middle of the night. You don't understand what it's like to have these campaigns of terror instituted against your territory, against your homes and families. So you don't get it. But the Palestinians understood that under the PLO, they were being subverted, they were being subjugated, and it was really just a Mossad cutout at that point. They installed subcontractors to take on the duties of occupation, and so that the Israelis could wash their hands clean and say, look, we're not really involved, even though they were very intimately involved, and they, that's been spelled out throughout the entire 90s. And that led to the second intifada, which began peacefully. It was a peaceful protest against the occupation forces. And guess what happens? According to the Israeli minister at the time, who was involved in the Oslo Accords, Shlomo Ben Ami, says that the IDF escalated the situation. There was an authentic Palestinian struggle for self-determination, the Second Intifada I'm talking about.
I'm listening to
Misfit, are you listening?
I
Okay.
don't have to look at you to
2000,
listen to you.
2001, the Second Intifada
Yes.
began peacefully. It was a peaceful protest against the occupying force, and the finance minister, Shlomo Ben-Ami, or maybe he was the foreign minister, I forget, he concluded that it began peacefully and it was an authentic Palestinian struggle for self-determination, and it only escalated into an all-out war when the IDF started shooting them down after, maybe a kid was throwing a rock or something,
Okay.
Because those rocks are really deadly.
It's a kid that threw the rocket.
Yeah. Or maybe it was
what
a
about
sandwich. I don't
how
know.
many rockets are fired into Israel
Again,
on average?
You do not claim a moral right if that moral right traces back to an illegal wrong. This is something that the ancient Greeks understood.
So we go back
when they
to-
said ex injuria non jus orator, they meant that a legal right cannot be invoked from an illegal wrong. So when you acquire territory and you occupy people, you don't get the right to self-defense in occupied territory. That's not how it works.
It wasn't occupied.
It was
given under the
occupied.
British
and
mandate. So how far do you want to go back?
was-
Because your whole
yeah.
entire argument, everything that you've been saying, is a he started it argument. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so who started it and when?
Yeah.
Let's establish that.
Well, it depends
Well, we could
on-
go back to the beginning of time. I mean,
we could go back to-
we could go back
No,
3,500
no.
years.
Biblical rights have no status in the world
Okay,
today.
so you
You
don't wanna
can't
make a
invoke the Bible.
theological
We're talking
argument,
about
so
modern history, dude.
Let's start with modern
We have-
history. Let's
yes.
start with the creation of the nation state of Israel.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the UNGA 181 partition plan, which gave Israel the international birth certificate, was itself a declaration of war. I do not.
That's
I
your
do
opinion.
not agree with the decision to create the state of Israel.
Okay.
Okay.
So just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean it was not created.
Yeah. Well, we obviously know
Was
that
it created?
the Israelis
Was it
exist.
created in a legal format? Is it an established nation?
Yes, by the Western European and United States countries.
the
and
League-
this is the point, though.
League of Nations
Even
and
those institutions that gave Israel the international birth certificate in 1948, even those institutions condemn Israel ever since 1967. That's why my argument goes back to 1967 formally.
But not 1948.
Well, it does for me, yes. It does go back to 1948. In fact, it goes back to 1917. It goes back to the 1890s, ever since Jewish immigration to Palestine
Jews
by the Zionists started.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go.
when you-
so
your
Theodore
whole
Herzl's
argument is a might makes right.
Theodore Herzl's vision for a modern state of Israel where Jews have a right to live in peace and exist in that particular location, which wasn't
not
even,
his formulation.
It wasn't even really part of the original plan to be.
If
right
you
there
read
in
Theodore
Israel.
Herzl's diary, he makes clear that he knew that they would have to dispossess and spirit the penniless population of the territory to come over to our sides after we've dispossessed and taken their lands and resettled it. We're going to give them breadcrumbs to make sure that they're going to be copacetic to the whole situation.
But let's
they knew dispossession and depriving of the land resources and labor of these indigenous peoples was always part of the plan. That's the formulation of Zionism at the beginning.
Okay, but let's just at least agree on the point that Israel was created, and whether you agree with it or not, it was created. It's a nation, right? And then there was a dispute over
It's a nation that is. Sorry.
Well, there was this dispute over who gets what. A lot of deals were turned down by the Palestinians, and they were offered this territory and that territory, and they said no, 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 and they started war after war after war after war. And you think all of these wars, right, that have been started by one side, right? It's a very one-sided initiation of conflict. You think all of them are justified because all of its resistance, just because of the mere fact that Israel was created.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.